Okay, good morning, folks. It's great to see you this morning as Advent is upon us. Very busy time. And before we get started, actually, I'd like to bless the meeting and your being with us. We can have a word of prayer. Loving God, we come before you today with gratitude for the people of faith and their ancient stories. The story of Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, and Isaac remind us of the promise of new beginnings and the fulfillment of your covenant. We also lift up the story of Elkanah, Hannah, Eli, and Samuel that help us grasp the significance of devotion and the power of prayer. And these stories lead us to the most amazing one, that of Zechariah, Elizabeth, Mary, Joseph, and the birth of Jesus Christ in his herald, John the Baptist. As we reflect on these connections, may we strengthen the threads of hope, redemption, and purpose that bind them together and to you. Lead us to understand and appreciate the depth of your love and recognize how it unfolds in our lives today. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, good morning, folks. It's with great pleasure that I first would like to introduce my partner, Jean Dudek. I think you're all familiar with Jean, master storyteller and member of our congregation. As we look throughout the year, Jean, you have been with us, and she's also the highly acclaimed and recognized author of Ascent of Bright Light, which is a fictional interpretation, but fascinating. Her book about Hagar and Sarah and their relationship. So thank you, Jean. Good to have you with us this morning.
I am happy to be here, Carol.
Yeah, we're going to have a little talk as we look at a newer book from Amy Jill Levine, who is the Rabbi Stanley Kessler Distinguished Professor of New Testament now at Hartford International University, and was for years the professor of New Testament and Jewish Studies, now emerita at Vanderbilt Theological University. Amy AJ, we call her, and Diane Whitaker and I got to meet her this summer. We were in Montreat and got to see her and meet her in person. She's a fascinating person in that the depth of her knowledge and respect for the New Testament flowing from the Old Testament is so highly regarded. And her newer book is different in that we usually look at the two nativity stories from Matthew and Luke and make references back to the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. But A.J. Levine in this book really goes into depth about the stories, these ancient stories of the Old Testament first, and makes connections to the revered nativity story. We can't share everything that's in the book. I highly recommend it, but we do want to highlight some of the key stories that we thought were different and that might give us a new respect and perspective on the nativity. So let's first look at her introduction. She makes an introduction, and we do want to warn you, the technical challenges are such that you may want to listen very carefully because the volume's not as high as we'd like it to be. But at this point, let's take a look at her introduction to the book. Diane, do I need to stop sharing myself or?
Yes.
Okay. Diane's my guru here. All right.
This gives us complicated family systems. And we can just look at the stories of Isaac, the child of Abraham and Sarah, and Ishmael, the child of Abraham and Hagar, to see how complicated things get. In a society where one can have more than one wife, so we have rival wives, and rival wives create rival mothers. Sarah married to Abraham for years. She's in her 90s. She's always wanted to have a child, as far as we know, and she's been unable to do so. So she thinks she has an enslaved woman, Hagar, an Egyptian. She'll arrange for Hagar and Abraham, Sarah's husband, to have relations, and then if Hagar has a child, then Sarah can claim that child as her own. And that's exactly what happens. But the problem is, Hagar comes into her own as well. She realized she's pregnant with the master's child, and Sarah begins to look light in her eyes. Like, not only because Hagar is pregnant and Sarah is not, but Sarah's beginning to seem a little bit lightweight. When the child is born, he's named Ishmael. God hears. And Sarah's jealous of this child. Sarah eventually becomes pregnant herself. She gives birth to Isaac, and she can't abide the idea that Isaac would have a rival, that perhaps Abraham would love Ishmael, Hagar's son, more than he would love Isaac, Sarah's son. So she insists to her husband Abraham that Ishmael and Hagar be banished. And they are. The stories continue of Ishmael and Isaac and Sarah and Hagar, and they raise for us questions for today about jealousy, about rivalry, about advocacy for one's children, about questions of inheritance, about how we assess these individuals. Was Sarah wrong? Was Abraham wrong? Was Hagar right? What will the children be like when they grow up? And the amazing thing about this is we can look at these stories in Genesis and then flip over to the New Testament, to the stories of the birth of Jesus, to the stories of the birth of John the Baptist, of Elizabeth and Mary. And in pretty much all cases, we can read the New Testament and then flip back to the Old. And because of that light in the New Testament, we see something in the Old that's different. And because of the Old Testament, when we read that, and then we read the Advent stories anew, the stories of the conception and birth of John and the conception or birth of Jesus, we again see something new. So putting these stories into conversation gives added meaning to both. And the sense of added meaning is in fact what Advent is all about. We have the world, and then we have expectation of something more. There's a belief in God, and then there's another way of accessing that God. Everything becomes richer, everything becomes more complicated, and everything becomes more worth discussing. Hagar is not free. She is enslaved to Sarah. Hagar has no background as far as we know. She could have been given enslaved to Sarah when Abraham and Sarah left Egypt, but we don't know this. So here we have this woman who looks pretty powerless, taken away from her home country, impregnated by her owner's husband. And now because she's being abused in the household, this is our first story of domestic abuse, pregnant Hagar runs away. And it is to this woman who has been through so much and is so much of an outsider that it is to this woman that an angel appears. And more than that, following that appearance, Hagar thinks, I have actually seen God. And she labels the place El, meaning God, Ro'eh, one who sees. And we can translate that in one of two ways, or both ways. Hagar has the God who sees, the God who pays attention, the God who watches over us. But we can also read that as Hagar is the one seen by God. We are seen by God. We are noticed no matter what our station in life, no matter what our ethnicity, no matter what our gender. God sees us. Hagar has become pregnant. Hagar gives birth. But the promises, the covenants, according to Genesis, will not go through Hagar. They will go through Abraham's wife, Sarah. So here we are in Genesis 18. Sarah and Abraham are by their tent. I'm thinking more like a glamping idea. It's a big tent. And suddenly 3 strangers appear in the distance. Well, who those strangers are depends upon what questions you ask from them. Traditionally in Christianity, the 3 strangers represent the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Judaism, it's God and 2 angels. And biblical scholars think it's 3 people and then a story developed around them. But whatever they are, according to the story, they're supernatural messengers. Abraham sees them in a distance, and epitomizing hospitality, he runs out and says, in effect, come to lunch. Now, if my husband did that, he saw 3 strangers in the distance, then invited them to come to lunch, I would think this is a little peculiar. And then he says, Sarah, sweetie, go make cakes. And I'm thinking, maybe not. In fact, he says, go take 3 measures of flour and make cakes, which of course sends me to this nice parable in the Gospel of Luke about taking 3 measures of flour and hiding it in dough till all of it is leavened. And Sarah does. She's obedient. She's a good wife. And the strangers are talking to Abraham. Sarah's off the scene. And they say to him, your wife Sarah, who has been infertile for a good 90 years, is going to get pregnant. And Abraham starts to laugh, one might. And the angels or God, whoever this is, says, no, it's fine. And Sarah's listening through the tent flap, and she hears this, and she starts laughing as well. And she says, now that my husband is old and I am old, am I to have pleasure? The Hebrew word for pleasure is Edna. It's a cognate of the word Eden. And Sarah's not only thinking about the pleasure of having a baby, she's thinking of the pleasure of conceiving it. And the angels recognize that she's been laughing, and they say, why are you laughing? You shouldn't be laughing. And she's like, no, I didn't laugh. And the angels said, you did. Advent is a time of laughter, of joy, of surprise, of unbelievable things happening. And the joy of the waiting, like pregnancy is a joy in waiting, the joy of the birth, the joy of the child, and also the enormous surprise, here conveyed by heavenly messengers. Sarah is jealous of Hagar, and Sarah is also jealous of Ishmael, who is Abraham's firstborn, and Abraham cares about Ishmael. So one day Sarah sees Isaac, just a little child, 3 years old, and Ishmael, much older, playing with each other. And Sarah thinks, this is not good. What exactly they were doing, tradition has different explanations, for they were playing together, and therefore Isaac was transferring his attention from his mommy now to his exciting, interesting, stronger and bigger older brother, and Sarah was jealous. Or perhaps Sarah thought that Ishmael was somehow abusing her little boy. Or perhaps Sarah is thinking, these two are going to plot against me, the next generation against the older generation. For whatever reason, Sarah says to her husband, Abraham, you need to banish this child, Ishmael, and you need to banish his mother, Hagar. Why? Because I do not want my son Isaac inheriting with Ishmael. Ishmael needs to go. And Abraham is grieved because of this, because Abraham loves Ishmael. It's not clear whether Abraham loves Sarah or not, but I'd like to think so. Abraham doesn't want to do it, but God says, listen to the voice of your wife. This is the right thing to do, because the promises are going to go through Isaac. We shouldn't be super worried about this, because Hagar, in her Annunciation, was told by the angel that her yet-to-be-born son would become a prince, would have his own family, would have his own tribe, and would do very well. But that's just a prediction. It hasn't come true yet. So Hagar and Ishmael are banished. And what are we to think of Sarah and Abraham throwing these people out in the desert? There are no social services out there in the desert. It's not clear that they're going to have enough food. They go with a little pack of food and a little bit of water. But how do you get through the desert like this? This is the Bible provoking us, and that's what the Bible does. The name Israel traditionally means to wrestle with God. So the Bible gives us stories. What would we do if we were there? If we were Sarah, what else would we do? Do we have a conscience? Do we care about this child? If we were Hagar, would we speak back? Could we speak back? Or might we be thinking, finally, I am free, I am out of this household? If we were Ishmael, would we be thinking, but I'm going to miss my baby brother Isaac, and I'm going to miss my father Abraham, and I'm going to miss my home, which is the only home I've ever known? The Bible forces us to ask these questions, because all of these stories, they may be entertaining, they may be interesting, but they also raise moral choices, moral questions. And these are the questions that people of faith should wrestle with. Hagar and Ishmael are expelled from their camp, from their family. We go to the New Testament, we find, according to the Gospel of Matthew, that Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus have to leave their home in Bethlehem because of the atrocities of King Herod the Great, who wants to slaughter all the babies. Both stories are stories about people in exile, people who wind up being migrants, people who have to leave home and relocate. They're stories about parents who are so worried about their children and doing what they can to protect them, whether that protection is well motivated, clearly with Mary and Joseph, or a problem, as with Sarah. What do we do when our whole family is being disrupted, when something new happens, when circumstances change? The more I read the story of Isaac and Ishmael, the more I think about Jesus, a promised child, a child through whom the covenant will continue, an endangered child, a child whose mother needs help, as she does with Elizabeth, which is why in the Gospel of Luke, Mary and Elizabeth come together. They need that mutual support. I see the story of Hagar and Sarah, and it reminds me of Elizabeth and Mary. But what went wrong with Hagar and Sarah goes perfectly right with Elizabeth and Mary. As if we just tell the story one more time, we see one more twist of it, perhaps it will come right round.
Okay, well, Amy Jill, mentions the concept of putting these stories in conversation, which is a good way to frame it as we discuss them this morning. Another biblical scholar has expressed it maybe in a more colloquial way, saying, the women in the Bible all knew each other.
Yeah, so would you like to reread the section from Genesis, and we'll hear it and then talk about this a little bit more?
Okay.
Let me get my own screen up here so that you can see where we're going, but okay.
Okay, so this is the place in Genesis where Sarah is complaining to Abraham, and he says, your slave's in your power, do with her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to shore. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man with his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his kin. So she named the Lord who spoke to her. You are El Roah, she said. Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?
So we have this situation that Amy Jolene starts with as far as really the beginning of our faith, the families that begin the faith. And interestingly enough, she goes back to that story, and instead of really looking at Sarah, who we generally focused on, Sarah, the mother of Isaac, she focuses on the relationship or the similarity between Hagar and Mary. And so let's think about that a little bit more. In all of these stories, many of these stories, so I've been doing a lot of reading this week and rereading, and my goodness, I've gone back to my own childhood and wow, didn't realize how many stories are back there. But most of these birth stories really are miraculous stories, and the miraculous stories are about people that were infertile and then miraculously give birth to these people that become great leaders, and they're kind of unsuspected. You definitely wouldn't have thought that Sarah would be the mother of the leader of our faith, of Isaac. But if you look at Hagar and think about Hagar's situation and how challenging that must have been for her as a young, probably a teenager, we don't know, but we're about to look at a painting that might provoke some thoughts. But then we do know that Mary most likely was a teenager, and both of them are apparently very fertile, in contrast to the mothers of a number of the other about to be leaders of the faith. So, the fact that Hagar, first of all, and there are the angels speak to these people. Sometimes at the beginning, around the beginning of this time, God does directly speak to his characters. He speaks to Abraham directly. But the angel Gabriel has an important role through all of these stories. And so here you have Hagar, who first of all has been set up to bear the master's child. And the angel has to speak to her twice, because the first time the angel tells her that she's going to bear this very important child. We just heard about that from Jean.
And I'll just interject
Yeah.
here. What the angel says to Hagar about Ishmael is actually quite a bit like what Abraham is told about Isaac. And, I think sometimes we overlook the importance of Hagar and Ishmael, but it's they are very similar promises that are made.
Yeah. So I guess, she goes back and to the family, the tent, wherever they are, bears the child. And things, I guess, were going pretty well with this child growing up. And then all of a sudden, Sarah is told that she will bear a child. And then as the child comes along, Sarah decides, let's get rid of Ishmael and Hagar. So she is caught in this very difficult situation in the desert and told to flee. Mary herself, if we consider the situation of Mary is suddenly visited by this angel and told that she is going to bear a child, a miraculous conception. She apparently was engaged. We're not sure about the sequence of all of this as far as when Joseph finds out about this conception, but she is engaged. Then she finds also out that her cousin, Elizabeth, is going to bear a child. Now, this is truly miraculous because Elizabeth is just about as old as Sarah was. But the situation is different in this part of the story. Elizabeth is supportive. Elizabeth and Mary can support each other, both caught in an incredible conception situation, but the two of them can bind together and actually birth their children. And so as we look at the sequence of events, our birth story, the birth story of Christ, who's told his name is going to be Jesus, salvation, is one with support of glory and more certainty. We want to add a little bit to this, people.
Yeah, let's get some discussion here. I mean, this was sort of news to me. I never really thought about connections between Hagar and Mary. But once I started looking at it, I found some, and from this, does anybody, can you think of some ways in which Hagar and Mary are in a similar situation?
Or the qualities they might have in that situation.
I think you've described it pretty well of how, the parallelism between the two situations. But I guess the question came to me, I don't know if you want to go in this direction. What is the theology of this? Is it that the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible sort of depicts these relationships in their most raw form? And in the New Testament, there's a brighter, better, higher part of humanity that can exist? Is anybody making that point?
I would think it would depend on your perspective, because it turns out that Ishmael does turn out to be a great leader and is probably one of the strongest leader recognized of the Muslim faith. And so maybe being banished built strength, built courage, and they're part of the story. It's not clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
between
think-
the Old and New Testament, I guess I wouldn't say that the take home here is, well, in the New Testament, we got it right here. Or we're better, or the New Testament's better than the Old Testament. I don't think that's where we should be going with that. It's more like the same basic storyline happens over and over with variations. And here, a variation is that, the older woman, in this case, Elizabeth, is supportive in a way that Sarah at first is, her idea that Hagar should do this. And then later not. And then that their sons, Jesus and John, are mutually supportive in various ways. Just the notion of, John preparing the way for Jesus, whereas Ishmael really isn't able to do that for Isaac because they've been separated. Most of these, yes, Diane.
Yeah, well, I have a thought. I don't know if it plays into this, but I wonder if Sarah doesn't have that sense of prophecy and history that Elizabeth and Mary have. They've gone through the Babylonian captivity. They're back in Judea. They have that sense of history, of heritage, but Sarah's at the beginning of things. And they harken back to Eden, but they don't have that sense of where is this going?
Right. That's the thing. Like, Sarah and Abraham, they're really at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I really had gotten to thinking, it's like, they don't know much about this God who's talking to, sometimes it's both of them, sometimes it's just Abraham. So I feel like they're still kind of trying to figure these things out. And also the stories at the beginning of Genesis before them, those are, they may not have known those stories, I guess, is the bottom line. So so that's a interesting point, Diane.
Yeah.
And also, if you think about most of these birth stories, it's a matter of an infertile woman who may or may not specifically, be old, but an infertile woman has a baby, and then that baby becomes someone important. And here Hagar and Mary are the two examples of a young woman who has, a baby who, I guess with Jesus we would say miraculous, but important, prophesied, predicted by God. God has said something about them. So Mary and Hagar are similar in that way, that they're young and fertile. And as it says here, this wasn't their idea, really.
Yeah.
For the other ones where it was an infertile woman or an older woman, they have been praying for it.
Yeah, so are there any comments from those of you who are remote? We've got quite a few people remotely. Well, let's look at the way this. One of the other remarkable things that has struck me is these ancient stories have been graphically portrayed throughout the years. So let's look at some of the more. We had so many paintings to choose from. But interestingly enough, this is, let me look at this. This goes back to, gosh, the 18th century, I believe. Yeah, this is, no, this is the guy, the painter, this painter is Dutch. And let's look at this painting. Here you have the situation of Sarah trying to persuade, Abraham that this gal is who he should be okay with. And I don't know if you can, maybe I can make this a little bit larger. I don't know. If you can look at Abraham's face, here he is caught with Sarah persuading Abraham that, he really should take this gal and father a child with her. A web of emotions are involved here. So this is an interesting situation that did work out. I mean, in that Hagar submitted to God's will. What the angel told her was God's will, and went through with this. It must not have been easy.
Oh, well, let's go back to.
Okay.
Yeah. I looked at it and said, like, Hagar doesn't look very Egyptian in this painting. That beautiful white silk gown,
Well, if you-
probably not
if-
what a slave would be wearing.
But
But it does, I mean,
yeah,
but it
sure.
really does, with that shiny white, she's really what catches
I
your
guess
eye.
maybe she's a virgin at this point before the whole decision. Anyway,
Who knows?
shiny
But,
white's there.
And yeah, and as if you read the story, Abraham is really pretty passive about this, like, oh, you want me to do this? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just delighted on the next one. I was just delighted Carol found this one and, and chose it as the Annunciation, because this is like my favorite painting of the Annunciation. So it's like, and this is on display at the Philadelphia.
I mean, we
Museum
can
of
go
Art.
back
They
to-
they have it and it's up and
We could go back to paintings from the 1300s, and Tanner we've got two painters that will be represented that at the end of the 19th century who are followed more in an impressionistic style, but Tanner himself is a Black painter, one of the few well-recognized American Black painters. And but we look at his view of the Annunciation and think about what Mary must have been dealing with or feeling or
Yeah, I like this one because it's one of the few paintings of the Annunciation where Mary looks like a first century Palestinian peasant.
Yeah.
Hey, what a concept.
I was gonna ask, because you can't tell from here, she does look submitted or.
Yeah.
The
Apparently
look
she
on
does,
her
yeah.
face, that's it's really good. I mean, she's kind of questioning. Sometimes I look at this and I kind of see, she's like, 14. I don't know. Is there a 14-year-old girl in your life now or at some other time where she's kind of got a, you want me to do what? Look on her face.
Yeah.
And
When we think about it, the courage that she must have had, because in a way, I mean, she was told that the son that she was going to have was going to be the son of God and given the throne of David, and that his reign would never end. And, at the time, the people were living in difficult times, dominated by the Romans, and wow, this, I don't know, I guess. Maybe
Yeah, some
she was
like
about to birth a terrorist. I don't know.
Yes, yeah, this has recently been kind of put a sharper point on this to say, throne of David, reign forever. This is insurrection against the Romans, and she's being told this, and, the people are very much, oppressed and, colonized by the Romans. And yeah, and also just her own personal situation. It's like,
Yeah,
we know that thousands of churches, schools, and hospitals will be named after her. What she knows is, in her society, if you're pregnant when you're not supposed to be, you can be stoned to death.
yeah,
So there's a lot of courage on Mary's part, and I'm not sure that always comes across. We just kind of have her saying, you know, let it be with me according to your word, sure, yeah, whatever. And
yeah.
it's there's a lot of courage there, just like for Hagar to take the angel's advice and go back to this abusive situation. Also takes a lot of courage on her part.
Yeah. And also, well, so the relationship here shown between Elizabeth and Mary this goes back to Byzantine times, and I don't have the date of these images, but
Yeah, they may not have them. I found these when I was in Barcelona in the Museum of Catalan Art, which has a major Byzantine collection. I had seen some Byzantine art before, but not so much. But I really liked both of these, which is why I took the photographs. But just that they're glommed together there, their halos merge, just the depiction of the bond there. And I'm also noticing, different periods. This is kind of an art historical thing. Different periods, I think different Bible stories were emphasized. I found stories depicted there in Barcelona that I don't normally see when we're looking at medieval and certainly like Renaissance times. And so here's another. This was a multi-panel thing. You've got the Annunciation to Mary, and then Mary and Elizabeth. Elizabeth's got quite the psychedelic shawl there. But so I like those for drawing out that relationship between Mary and Elizabeth, and even just that
and actually also, we talked about the political situation with Mary giving birth, but also for Elizabeth, because John ends up being a big part of Jesus' life and story, and preparing the way. It was really, really important. So yeah, we've got quite a situation going here.
Yeah, and even baby John, or maybe I should say fetal John, leaps for joy, when Mary comes, and Elizabeth comments on that. I wonder here, if they were hugging like that, did Mary feel John kick or move or whatever? So just pointing towards the close relationship they're going to have, that it's a little harder to tell what the relationship between Ishmael and Isaac had been. It's very obscure what that, Sarah saw them playing. It's the Hebrew is very tricky for a lot of reasons. So it's kind of tough to know what their relationship was.
So another story that is related or becomes related to the ultimate nativity story is that of Hannah and Samuel. And this should read, I thought I changed that slide. It should be 1 Samuel 1 through 28. Let's learn about this story and think about the implications that it has.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of times people know, if they're making connections between Old and New Testament, a lot of people are aware of Mary's Magnificat being based on Hannah's song of praise. But there's other connections, and that is in how we got to Samuel in the first place. That story, I think, is not as well known. So I'm going to read that. It's a little bit longer than the other passage.
So yeah, it's 1 Samuel 1 through 28.
Yeah. There was a certain man, I'm going to skip some details there, whose name was Elkanah. He had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other, Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Have we seen an issue like this before? Now, this man used to go up year by year from his town to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival used to provoke her severely to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" I think maybe the answer is no. I see some heads shaking.
Yeah.
After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow: "O Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the misery of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a male child, then I will set him before you as a Nazirite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head." As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, "How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine." But Hannah answered, "No, my lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time." Then Eli answered, "Go in peace. The Lord of Israel grant the petition you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your sight." Then the woman went her way and ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I have asked him of the Lord." The man Elkanah and all his household went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and to pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, "As soon as the child is weaned, I will bring him, that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and remain there forever. I will offer him as a Nazirite for all time." Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Do what seems best to you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish your word." So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. She brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, and the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who is standing here in your presence praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me the petition that I made to him. Therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord." And they worship the Lord there.
Oh, so here we have a story of waiting. Immaculate, not immaculate
No.
conception,
No,
but.
Nope, they're
very,
married,
you know,
no thing.
Yeah, but she'd been just so distraught that apparently though, Elkanah, her husband, has not divorced her, but yet she has had no child. And she really, 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 really is frustrated. Yet she still prayed. her courage in continuing to pray was fairly amazing.
Now, we selected this story because of the connection between Elkanah and Joseph. There's a connection that can be drawn between these fathers, and like, let's face it, we often overlook the fathers when doing these birth stories, and especially sometimes, Joseph may be overlooked when we're focusing on Mary and Jesus. But some take-home points here about Elkanah is that he is very supportive of Hannah, as Carol pointed out, doesn't divorce her even though she's infertile. And this thing about the vow, the Nazarite vow, is something I think a lot of people aren't too familiar with. But essentially, Hannah is giving away their child. Now remember, this is Elkanah's child too, and even though he does have the other children with Peninnah, a lot of times, the favorite son is the son of the favorite wife, and at last the favorite wife is having a child and he's been given away. They just, some fathers might not be too happy about that. And she makes this vow, this Nazarite vow thing, which is kind of obscure to a lot of us. Women and men could make such a vow. But according to, which often would be the, no razor, you can't cut the hair, and no wine or strong drink, or as I looked into it,
Yeah.
no grape products, can't eat raisins even. And you can take a vow for that Nazarite vow for a certain period of time, or it can be for life. And here his mother is making this vow for his whole life. And whereas women could make these vows, her husband or father had the right to nullify that vow under certain conditions. I think you had to do it reasonably promptly. So Elkanah could have said, "Hey, what are you doing with my kid here? No, you're not. No, you're not." Handed him off to Eli the priest, but he didn't. He accepted this. And on the next picture,
Yes.
which shows Hannah and Elkanah giving Samuel to Eli. If you look closely at the text, it's not 100% clear that Elkanah goes along on this trip. It said that Hannah took him there, and it says to Eli, it says they slaughtered the bull, but maybe that was Eli and some other temple servants. It's, when I was looking at this painting, I was like, maybe Elkanah was there, maybe he wasn't. That did not seem to be their usual, trip up there. So those are some things to think about with Elkanah. Probably you're more familiar with the call of Samuel when, Samuel is living with Eli. So that is a story to consider.
Right. And well, and the other parallels too, she does compare Mary and Hannah, the fact that they both again submit to whatever the Lord is, except that Hannah is much
Hannah's asking for it.
She's
praying for that baby.
That she's gonna have this baby. But when she does find out about it, her song of praise is a beautiful song, as is Mary's. And there's actually, a lot of parallels there. But again, here we have the situation of this father who apparently was quite loving and submitted to her. Well, okay, if you want to do this, I'm going to go along with you. And that must have been quite a step to have taken. At the same time, when we look at this, we think about the position of Joseph and what his situation must have been. And I mean, would we have had this actual nativity that worked out without Joseph as being having a really more significant role than he usually ever gets in the story? So we think about the different stages of her finding out that she's going to conceive a child. What does Joseph do at that point? Matthew says that he did consider divorce and then apparently didn't go through with this.
An angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary
Yeah.
as your wife.
And then he, in Luke, brings her to Jerusalem, which was the site of his family. So that was rather important and how that all syncs together with Jesus's background, since he's not supposed to be a blood relative. I'm not sure. That's because it's the family of Jesse and David, but nevertheless, and there was that time period where Joseph is visited by the angel again, who warns him to take the child to Egypt, which he does. So that was an important, I mean, I guess Herod was seeking Jesus out, and he managed to escape, and kind of the reverse of Moses escaping from Egypt and going back to the promised land. But then there's this other part of the story that that really does relate to that of Elkanah going along and submitting Samuel to the house of the Lord. And that was I guess we'll read this one other important part of the story.
Okay,
Yeah.
the Joseph part?
Well,
Yeah, why don't we go ahead on the slides here?
okay.
We've got
Well,
that.
where are we gonna read Luke 2?
Yes,
Where,
yes.
and then we'll show the slides.
Okay, okay, so that story from First Samuel kind of shows Elkanah as being displaced as a father. Eli is the one who is really going to be raising Samuel. So here is the story I'm sure you know, but let's take a look at it in light of what happens with Elkanah. This is from Luke chapter 2, verse 41. Now, every year, his parents, meaning Jesus's parents, went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware of this. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. So that line about, didn't you always be in my father's house? Joseph is standing right there. How did Joseph feel about that? So this notion of Joseph being kind of displaced as a father is still doing various things.
Go to the slide.
Yeah. Okay, I found this at, there was a big exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art about the art of painting. And this one was a standout. This showed up in a lot of the promotional materials. If you can get a look at those faces, there is a lot more expression going on than what you'd expect in 1342. You can see Jesus has his arms folded, and he's got his eyes half closed, and he's got this totally adolescent look, being grumpy about this. Joseph obviously is distressed about this and says, listen to your mother, and even Mary, seems a bit annoyed here. But this was such a wonderfully evocative painting of that situation. I wanted to get it in here.
Well, and in fact, Joseph had the power, probably could have had the power to, I don't know, beat Jesus, punish him, yeah, put him in, and make sure that he didn't leave the house at this point in time. But there's an acknowledgement that, yeah, that the family, Joseph and Mary, really made a difference in Jesus's life. And this is something for us to, think about. Think also about the actual birth and what the couple had to go through. What was it like to have been in a strange place and strange time, and then for the birth to have taken place? And this is one of my favorite paintings of the actual of the birth. If you look at Mary, I guess, the child is there. She's had the child, but she's had it. And Joseph is there, but they've been through quite an experience here.
And they don't look like they're in a very comfortable place. They look like they're in the hall.
Yeah, well,
So
or maybe
kind of
that's part of the stable or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't tell, but it's certainly not yeah.
It doesn't look very private.
No. So I think the amazing part about a lot of these stories, first of all, is that the characters are just not who you would have thought would have been involved in producing and dealing with some of the most important decisions, and here this child that was born this way to have become the leader that he did become, still invokes in us, sort of the hope, maybe, that out of what might be a situation that is very, very difficult, that there may be hope amongst the despair of the time. But other folks, your response?
Yeah, we should leave a little time for
Yeah,
discussion here. And is there
Just
anything
a few minutes
is there
left, but
anything
we
in the
have a
chat
few-
to attend to?
Yeah, the story is something that I think in this day and time, we're going to be dealing actually next week. We've got a group of folks who is a panel that will be talking about our time period right now and how difficult it is right now to look amongst us and look throughout the world and find hope amidst the despair that many of us have had to face, particularly this year. And I think, what is the theology? It's not totally neat and clear. This is, not this Hollywood story. In fact, the Wicked Witch may may have disclosed the Wizard of Oz, but is that going to happen right now amongst us? We don't know, but what we do know is that throughout time, the hope that emerges is not one that we can actually plan for. When it happens, we have to rejoice, but we go through a lot in our lives and don't know how to respond. But any other comments from folks that are with us or watching or here?
It just strikes me the importance in these various stories that is human in terms of procreation and having a child and what that evokes in people's feelings and behavior.
And actually, when you meet a little kid, the joy of these toddlers, these little ones, the hope of the world does come
Right.
through them. I mean, those of us who are grandparents or parents, you do have to go back and think about new life and the hope that can be there. Diane, did you have something you?
No, you said it well, Ben.
I just, we have Jesus talking in the temple, and the folks are actually paying attention to him. And this morning I got up and I added something. This is a painting that I actually did last year on the beach at sunrise. And as we walked, it was a kind of threatening day. Who knows? You don't know what lies ahead every day of our lives. And you hope that these storm clouds are not going to be as destructive, or that the earthquake that might have just occurred is not as destructive. And after I added this painting this morning, I looked out my window and this is what I saw.
That's pretty.
And I think we all need to remember that we can wait for the light, and the light is there, and it can be within us, and that there is hope. So we thank you for being with us this morning. Next Sunday really is going to be an important time. We have the very same panel that we heard from when we heard about loneliness last year. It was very evocative and people were very appreciative. And Venus Nasalam, Rob Bamberger, Michael Gibson, Susan Gibson will be will be sharing their feelings and advice, but more than that, welcoming you and all of us to deal with this challenge that we all have in finding hope amidst despair. And I did want to mention one more thing, that the following Sunday, which is the day of brunch and caroling, that morning we're going to have a party in adult ed where we share everything that we loved about being at Bradley Hills at Christmas time, and also that we look forward to. So I want to beg all of you to come a little early, to come to adult ed, tune into adult ed, share with us your hopes, your memories, the funny stories that you can tell, but the meaning that Bradley Hills has for you at Christmas time. And Diane, did you want to add one more thing?
No, I was just thinking maybe I'll bring some bread or
Yeah.
something, coffee cake or something.
Right,
For
yeah.
sharing.
But it'll be a festive day, and we wish you best during this festive season. And thanks for joining us this morning, and thank you, Jean, so much for lending your wonderful expertise and love. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Very good. All righty.
And we really only covered a fraction of the stories
Yeah.
and connections. If you're interested in more, it's not an expensive book, and I might even lend you mine.